Austin, Texas. By noon, the June heat was merciless, pressing against the glass walls of the Data Glow Tower like it wanted to melt them. I stepped onto the 14th floor, shirt clinging to my back, my head full of numbers. 40% revenue growth, powered by the AI system I'd built over the past 11 months. I wasn't there to brag about results. I came to ask for something small, a 15% raise. About the cost of one of the wine and investor nights Eli Turner, my boss, threw at the end of every quarter. His office gleamed, polished to the point where I could see my reflection on the floor. A half-finished espresso sat on the desk, and his monitor displayed a green line climbing upward, the profit chart driven by my algorithm. I took a deep breath and smiled. Eli, I want to talk about my salary. He looked up. That smile appeared, the kind men in California use when they want to look charming while dismissing you. Your southern accent's adorable, Natalie, he said, dragging out the words. But here, we don't negotiate with feelings. We negotiate with value. The air went still. Even the temperature seemed to drop. All the data, the charts, the reports I'd prepared, all of it reduced to a sentence dripping with condescension. I spoke softly, but clearly enough. Then maybe I should take my value somewhere else. His smile widened. He tilted his head as if I'd just told a joke. Everyone says that, Natalie. But you know, at Data Glow, we're not easy to replace. I looked him straight in the eye. For the first time in 4 years, I realized something. He actually believed it. He believed I wouldn't walk away. He believed I'd swallow the insult, go back to my desk, and keep coding his dream. In my mind, I saw the millions of records, the sleepless nights, the 2 a.m. calls to fix a tiny bug before a demo. I remembered the way he'd introduced me to investors. This is Natalie. She helps with a few algorithm components. Helps. My architecture, my logic, my nights. But to him, I was just the helper. I placed the report on his desk. 6 pages. Every line of proof I could offer. 40% revenue growth. A 32% reduction in system errors. 100% dedication. Never once paid for overtime. He skimmed through it like it was a drink menu, then nodded absently. Nice work. But, the company's restructuring. I didn't get a raise either. You just bought more shares, Eli, I said. I saw the SEC filing last week. He shrugged, smiling faintly. That's an investment, not a salary. My eyes went to his espresso, half empty. The perfect metaphor for how he saw me. Half worth, half recognition. I smiled, but didn't answer. And then my father's voice came back to me, slow, steady, Texas deep. Sweetheart, if someone laughs when you speak the truth, that's when you stop talking and start acting. I gathered my papers and stood. Thank you for your time. Eli looked up, surprised. You're not going to think about it? I just did. I walked out. My reflection followed me across the glass floor, small but sharper than ever. The door closed behind me, sealing in the faint sound of jazz. And for a long second, the only thing I could hear was his laugh, cold, hollow, echoing in my mind. Back home, we have a name for that kind of laugh. The sound of a man who thinks politeness is power. I didn't know how much that laugh would cost him, but I knew one thing. It had just cost him my loyalty. Back at my desk, Aurora was still running simulations, lines of code flickering like a heartbeat. I opened the log file, typed a few commands. Habit, nothing more. But something felt off. The system lagged, slower than usual. I frowned, told myself I'd check later. Right now, I just wanted out of this air, thick with self-importance. Before leaving, I looked once more at the glowing logo on the lobby wall. Data Glow. Bright data, dark humanity. Outside, in a 104-degree Texas afternoon, I whispered to myself, one day, Eli Turner will learn that value isn't in his smile. It's in my code. That day would come sooner than either of us expected. If you've made it this far, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'm Natalie Brooks, and this is how one smug smile changed the course of my life. They say Austin is where the South meets Silicon Valley, a city that smells like BBQ, but dreams in code. Dataglow was born right in that strange intersection. Half the staff wore leather boots and said y'all, the other half drank cold brew and said scale fast. I belonged to the first half. The South in me wasn't just an accent, it was how I was raised. Work hard, be kind, stay humble when success finds you. Unfortunately, none of those three meant much in a place that treated growth like religion. The Data Glow conference room always buzzed with that startup energy. Whiteboards filled with neon notes, slogans plastered on walls that read, "Move fast or die slow." At the center sat Eli Turner, a man who could talk for 2 hours without once saying the word people. I remember our March meeting about Aurora 2.0. I suggested we needed more time to test the error rates on rural population data. Eli cut me off. Investors don't care about farmers, they care about features. The room laughed. I smiled politely and said, "But farmers are customers too." They laughed even louder. One young guy clapped me on the shoulder. "Yes, sir? You really are the last Southern lady left in tech." I knew they didn't mean harm. But that laughter, light, harmless on the surface, slowly became a wall between us. At Dataglow, politeness was weakness. Humility was a lack of ambition. I called it growth without a soul. When I first joined, I truly believed we were building something good, an AI system that could predict supply chain demand, helping companies cut waste and costs. I spent 4 years on Aurora, fueled by coffee and insomnia, teaching it to understand people. Aurora was my creation, brilliant, stubborn, and sometimes learning the wrong things because of what people unknowingly fed it. I trained it on millions of behavioral data points, how Americans shop, eat, move, and decide. It grew sharper every month. The sharper it got, the richer Dataglow became. And the richer they became, the faster my name disappeared from every slide. Eli liked to call me the quiet engine. At first, I thought it was a compliment. Later, I realized it was how he kept me invisible. "Natalie is the technical soul of the team," he'd say during pitches. "Aurora is our collective achievement." Our, a word so small, yet big enough to swallow everything I built. Whenever someone asked a technical question, Eli just smiled and steered the talk back to vision and scalability. He lived for the spotlight. I lived behind it, making sure it worked. I didn't hate him. In fact, I almost admired his ability to make people believe in things that didn't exist. Eli could turn a system bug into an experimental feature. He spoke the startup dialect investors adored: fast, confident, never apologetic. After one pitch, he threw an arm over my shoulder and said, "You should learn to sell yourself, Nat. Around here, value isn't in the code, it's in the story." I answered, "If the code's good, enough, it tells its own story." He laughed. "Then your code had better learn to speak human." I laughed too, but it stung. That night, I stayed up until 3 in the morning writing a tone module, so Aurora could understand emotion in human voices. Part of me wanted to prove the code really could speak, if only someone bothered to listen. At Dataglow, everything came down to performance. No one talked about ethics. No one asked where the data came from. No one cared who got hurt. There was only one question: is it faster than the competition? And Eli always answered, faster, cheaper, smarter, never fairer. Every Monday, we had the Glow Up meeting, a show and tell of success. One intern stood up and announced, "Aurora improved forecast accuracy by 42% for East Bay." Eli clapped, flashing that signature grin. "That's my girl." Everyone cheered. I clapped too, but my hands felt cold. By the end of the 4th year, Aurora had pushed company growth up by 40%. Eli made the cover of Tech Frontier magazine. The headline read, "The Man Who Taught Machines to Understand Humans." I laughed when I saw it, not out of jealousy, but out of irony. He hadn't taught machines anything. He'd only taught people to forget who really did the work. My coworkers nicknamed me the Ghost Coder. I told them, "At least ghosts get their names in movie credits." They laughed, thinking it was a joke. I laughed too, because if I didn't, I'd cry. Sometimes when the office was empty, I stood by the window watching the lights of Austin flicker against the glass. I thought of my mother's voice. "You can bring light into a room, honey. Just don't let anyone turn it off." I told myself it was fine. One day Aurora would speak for me. What I didn't know was that when it finally did, it would reveal more than I ever intended. The hotel by Lady Bird Lake glowed like a movie premiere more than a tech award ceremony. I stood by the wall, a glass of water in hand, as the host announced clearly, Eli Turner, Data Glow, the man behind the first fair and transparent AI system in logistics. Applause erupted. Eli walked onto the stage, confident, his smile perfectly engineered. The crystal trophy caught the spotlight, scattering it across his hair, and in that instant, I saw it. He had taken all the light. Thank you to my amazing team, he said. No mention of me. No glance. Not a word. A reporter turned to me. What's it like working with the genius Turner? I smiled. He speaks very well, sounded like praise. Maybe not. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan spun lazily as I opened my laptop. Just curiosity. Wanted to see if my name appeared anywhere on the patent filing. I went to the USPTO website and typed Aurora Data Glow. The result appeared, cold and clinical as a verdict. Inventor, Eli Turner. I clicked open the file. The architecture was unmistakable. Pipeline, bias monitor, decision layer, every block I had designed, every idea I'd written. But nowhere did it say Natalie Brooks. I leaned back, the silence of my kitchen heavy around me. I'd always told myself I didn't care about fame, but seeing my name erased from my own creation made my stomach turn. The next morning, I knocked on Eli's office door. He was setting the crystal trophy on a shelf like a holy relic. I said plainly, I looked at the patent file last night. Why isn't my name on it? He didn't turn around. His voice stayed even. You're part of the team, Nat, and teams don't own ideas. I froze. That word, team, landed like a stone, small but heavy. I designed the entire bias monitor system, I said. You know that. Eli turned, smirking. And I turned it into a product. A patent is a strategic asset. You should be proud to have contributed. Proud? I said quietly. You just took the only thing that was mine, my name. He stepped closer, lowering his tone. Don't take it personally, Nat. This is for the company. I laughed, my voice rough. What hurts me isn't the company. It's knowing you understand exactly what you're doing. He fell silent. Sunlight cut through the glass, striking the crystal on his shelf, a blade of light between us. If you feel it's unfair, he said, HR can file an internal credit adjustment. I don't want credit, I said. I want the truth. He shrugged, his smile fading. Truth is just the story told by whoever holds the microphone. I said nothing more. We stared at each other, and I realized he wasn't my boss anymore, just a man good at telling stories. I left his office. In the elevator, my reflection in the brushed steel looked back at me, a nameless shadow. I reopened the email I'd sent Eli last night and added one line. I'm requesting full correspondence between DataGlow and the patent attorneys handling Aurora. Then I hit send. When the elevator doors opened, someone in the hallway was congratulating Eli. I walked past without turning around. That afternoon, the company posted an announcement. Congratulations to Eli Turner, the man who made Aurora a symbol of transparency. Below it was his photo, holding the trophy, his smile brighter than the logo behind him. I stared at the word transparency until my throat tightened. One thought crossed my mind. If they could do this to me, what else were they hiding? I opened my laptop and logged into the Aurora test environment. The code streamed by normally, except for one anomaly in the input data column. A dataset I didn't remember authorizing had appeared in the log. I frowned, typing deeper queries. The result blinked back. A hidden data repository, massive in size, linked to a storage address outside DataGlow's domain. I sat upright, my pulse kicked hard. This wasn't about a patent anymore. I messaged Marcus, an old friend at Neurometric, our biggest rival. Got a minute? I need help verifying something in Aurora. The screen showed typing, then went still. Outside the window, Austin burned under the afternoon sun, but in my mind, something had already cracked open. Maybe this wasn't just personal betrayal. Maybe Aurora and DataGlow were hiding something far bigger. I closed the laptop and looked out at the blinding reflection on the glass towers across the street. That light felt cold, synthetic, just like the stage lights last night, where my name was erased, but the truth wasn't. The message from Marcus came at 1:13 in the morning. Just 6 words. You should check Aurora's training data. The phone screen glowed in the dark apartment. Marcus never wasted words. I opened my laptop and logged into Aurora's test environment. The familiar stream of logs rolled by, then stopped. A new training job appeared, twice the usual data size, tagged with an unfamiliar code. I opened the metadata. The file path pointed to a storage cluster outside the internal network. Access level, exec dev group. I opened it. Inside were millions of records, with new fields that had never existed in the original dataset: ethnicity, gender marker, and income proxy. I froze. I had never added those. Aurora was built on one principle I'd written into every technical document. Do not use sensitive data. Do not train on what people haven't consented to share. I checked the source tag. It reads, External Acquisition. No supplier name, just a contract ID. DG SUP17. I knew that code. The execs used it whenever they wanted to hide third-party data purchases. A chill ran down my spine. I texted Marcus. Did you find something? He replied almost instantly. One of our clients flagged Aurora's risk scores. The model rates women and people of color way higher, too high to be random. I opened the bias monitor, the tool I'd written to detect unfair patterns. No alerts for the past 3 weeks. I checked the configuration. The alert mode had been switched to silent. The account responsible, Eli. Turner. My hands trembled. I ran a test on sample data, split by gender and race. The chart came up, 2 curves, far apart, a crack across the screen. Rejection rates for women and Black users were 30% higher. I stared, unable to breathe. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. I printed the graphs, the paper still warm under my fingers. On the cover page, I wrote, "They didn't just steal my work. They stole the trust of thousands." I traced the data logs deeper. Sensitive fields had been renamed. Zip code, risk. Household structure, first name/vector. Legal disguises for discrimination. The numbers stared back at me, hollow and cold. Aurora, the system I built to be fair, was now generating bias at scale. Marcus called. His voice was rough. We verified it. 3 false rejections. 2 Black women, 1 Latina. The model flagged them as high risk. Did they consent to share demographic data? I asked. No. Only transactional data. The rest, someone added it. I didn't speak. Aurora hadn't learned wrong. It had been taught wrong. I remembered Eli in that meeting saying, investors don't care about farmers. They care about features. Back then, I thought he was arrogant. Now I understood. He believed everything was disposable, as long as it fueled growth. I opened a new email to the legal department. Subject, urgent. Audit Aurora data sources. I attached the graphs, logs, and notes, and asked 3 questions. Where did dataset DG-SUP17 originate? Who approved exec dev access rights? Who disabled the bias monitor, and why? I CC'd HR and 1 board member known for integrity. Then I stopped, staring at the blinking cursor. The Southern girl in me whispered, "Don't make a scene." The engineer in me, who had just seen the truth, answered, "Staying quiet makes you complicit." I pressed send. The room was silent. I stood by the window. Austin still shimmered with city light, but everything around me felt darker. For the first time, I understood. Unfairness isn't just human, it's coded. A ping broke the silence. An auto reply from legal. Request received. Response time, 7 to 10 business days. I stared at the line, feeling as if they'd just thrown a blanket over a fire. 7 to 10 days. Plenty of time to erase logs, rewrite configs, and invent a new narrative. I couldn't wait. I sent an anonymous report to the National AI Ethics Commission, attaching the anonymized data, disparity charts, silent mode configuration, and dataset DG SUP17. In the note, I wrote, If a system raises revenue by lowering the worth of the vulnerable, can we still call it progress? I hit send. The screen flashed once, then went still. I stepped onto the balcony. The night breeze carried the faint smell of BBQ from across the lake. I thought about the people Aurora had misjudged, the ones who'd opened rejection emails, stared, maybe typed a reply, then deleted it because they had no one to tell. Faces that would never appear in reports, but bore the weight of the code I'd written. I sat down, opened my notebook, and on the last page wrote, "Artificial fairness can't exist when it's built on real injustice." I read it back, closed the notebook, and realized my story was no longer about Eli stealing credit. It was about me staying silent too long. The phone buzzed. Marcus again. "You just did the hardest part, but be careful. Data glow doesn't go down easily," I replied. "I'm not taking them down. I'm turning the lights on." I looked toward the city. Across the river, the Data Glow office lights still burned, their glass walls reflecting gold on the water. I wondered if anyone inside knew that every line of code they wrote was shaping the future of real people. The wind carried the damp scent of grass, mixed with the hum of distant traffic. I breathed in, my chest lighter. Tomorrow they might call me in. They might call me a traitor. But silence would betray far more people. I shut the laptop, turned off the lights, leaving only the small desk lamp glowing over the printed files. On top, in slanted handwriting, the same line stared back at me. "They didn't just steal my work. They stole the trust of thousands." I looked at it one last time, then slipped it into my bag. Tomorrow, I'd bring the truth into the light. I couldn't sleep that night. Lines of code stormed through my head like heavy rain. Every function, every model, every variable I'd once believed was fair. Now they all smelled like lies. The next morning, Marcus called. His voice was low, steady, but there was something else beneath the worry, a proposal. "Natalie, Neurometric wants you here. Double salary, stock options, and patent rights. Officially, under your name." I sat still, staring at the cold cup of coffee on my table. I should have felt happy. It was everything I'd dreamed of for 4 years. But instead of joy, I felt a tightness in my chest. "I'll think about it," I said quietly. Marcus hesitated. "If you stay, they'll bury everything. If you leave, at least you'll keep your soul." I hung up. The apartment was so silent I could hear the ticking of the clock, each second a question. Stay or go? I opened my notebook to the last page where last night's words waited for me. "Artificial fairness can't exist when it's built on real injustice." I added a new line beneath it. "Silence makes me complicit." My hands shook as I wrote. I knew I was about to break everything familiar, my job, my coworkers, my safety. But silence, that was far worse. Morning at Dataglow looked just like any other. The coffee machine hissed. Dashboards glowed with green profit lines. No one knew Aurora had already begun eating into the system. No one knew I'd sent an anonymous report to the U.S. AI Ethics Commission at 3 in the morning. But I knew. Somewhere in that inbox, the truth was waiting. Logs, charts, annotations that couldn't be rewritten. When I walked into the office, Eli was standing by the window, back to the light. "Sit down," he said, his voice clipped and cold. On the table lay a printed copy of my email to legal, slashed with red marks. "Are you trying to destroy us, Natalie?" I took a slow breath. "No. I'm trying to save what's left of us." Eli gave a short laugh. "Save us? You just put the entire team under federal investigation. Do you even realize what this could do to our shareholders?" I met his eyes. Shareholders might lose money, but the people Aurora rejected, they lost chances at life. He paused, then hissed. "Who do you think you are to lecture me on ethics?" I answered softly, without trembling. "The person who wrote the code you're using to fool the world." The room felt heavier, the air thick as glass. Eli stepped closer, voice dropping to a threat. "Don't forget who put you here. I gave you this opportunity. I can take it back." I smiled, weary but steady. "You can't take back something I was never given. Value doesn't come from power. It comes from conscience." His eyes flashed with anger. You know what, Natalie? This industry doesn't have space for the weak. Maybe not, I said evenly, but it still needs honesty. I left the room, my heartbeat racing. Part of me wanted to cry. Another part felt weightless, as if I'd finally broken the chain I'd carried. For 4 years. In the hallway, I ran into Rachel from my team. She whispered, "Everything okay? Eli looks like he's about to explode." I smiled. Maybe he just realized fairness can't be debugged with PR. Rachel didn't laugh. Her eyes softened. "Be careful," she said. "Around here, truth tellers are treated like system errors." I went back to my desk, opened my laptop for the last time. In my drafts sat Marcus's email, the official offer from Neurometric. I reread the line, "We need people who understand that AI isn't just code, it's a responsibility." I didn't hesitate anymore. I clicked reply and typed 4 words. "Let's talk tomorrow." Then I opened another email, this one addressed to HR. Subject, Resignation, Natalie Brooks. I kept it short. No explanations, no stories. When I hit send, the weight lifted from my chest. Later that afternoon, Eli appeared beside my desk, his face hard, voice cold. "You just signed your own death sentence. This industry's small, Natalie. Everyone knows everyone." I stood, met his stare. "Then at least they'll know I didn't stay silent," he sneered. "Who's going to believe you? A mid-level engineer against a CTO?" I shrugged. "They don't have to believe me. They just have to look at the data and the lawyers." Eli started to speak, then stopped. Maybe he realized it was already too late. I closed my laptop and picked up the worn leather notebook, the same one where Aurora was first born. Before leaving, I turned to him once more. "I'm not destroying the company, Eli. I'm just refusing to let my code destroy people." The door shut softly behind me, almost soundless, but in my head it thundered. That evening, I sat on the bridge over the Colorado River, watching the city lights ripple across the water. Austin was still warm, but the night wind was cold. I checked my phone. A new email. From the AI Ethics Commission. "Your report has been received. Thank you for coming forward. An investigation will be opened." I set the phone down and exhaled, not in fear, but in relief. For the first time, I was standing on the right side. Across the river, the Data Glow Tower gleamed, its lights reflecting on the surface like gold scars. I thought about them, those shimmering lines hiding the dark beneath. Then I whispered, "Light isn't always pure, but at least I've chosen the true kind." I smiled, small but certain. Tomorrow, I wouldn't walk back into that glass building. I'd walk somewhere new, somewhere value doesn't need permission to be seen. The hearing room of the U.S. AI Ethics Commission was smaller than I expected. Cold, bright white, no flowers, no tech emblems, just people and silence. 3 cameras were already live. My name and Eli Turner's sat on placards in front of 2 microphones, facing each other like opposing variables in an ethical equation. Marcus sat in the back row. He didn't say a word, just a nod. That was enough. The chairwoman, a silver-haired woman with a voice calm and sharp as glass, began, "This hearing will determine whether DataGlow Technologies violated ethical and privacy standards in training the Aurora AI system." Eli sat straight, shoulders tense, smile rehearsed to perfection. He spoke first. "First of all, thank you to the Commission for this opportunity. Aurora was an internal prototype. Some datasets were used temporarily to improve accuracy and were never commercialized. No actual harm occurred. A familiar tactic, turn a violation into a misunderstanding." His tone was so confident that a few heads nodded. I understood then why he'd been able to charm every investor in the room. I sat still, hands clasped, listening to every word, and when he finished, "Every decision we made was for the greater good," I finally stood up. "I'd like to respond," I said, keeping my voice steady. The chairwoman nodded. I plugged in a USB drive and opened the first slide. Data flow log, Aurora, Feb. 5/21. This log shows the training sequence. Line 148, records ingestion from dataset DGSUPP17, labeled external acquisition. No consent records, no license. Eli frowned, ready to interrupt. That data was only temporary. I turned to him. Temporary, but merged into the main pipeline. Logs don't lie, Eli. The room went still. I clicked to the next slide. Bias monitor configuration. This is the bias detection module. 3 weeks ago, it was switched to silent mode, the account that made the change. Eli Turner at DataGlow. Typing stopped. Eli's expression shifted. I continued, voice even. Aurora didn't just collect data illegally. It learned discrimination because the person teaching it chose to ignore the warnings. I displayed the comparison chart, 2 lines diverging sharply between white and non-white groups. Women and Black users were 30% more likely to be rejected. This isn't a technical error, it's a decision. One of the commissioners leaned forward. Ms. Brooks, do you have evidence that the company was aware of this before deployment? I nodded. Yes. I sent internal alerts to legal and HR on February 12th. No one responded. Instead, the system logs were wiped within 24 hours. I kept a private backup. Murmurs filled the room. Eli's hands tightened into fists. You exported company data. That's a breach of confidentiality. I turned to him, meeting his eyes. I didn't steal it. I preserved what you were destroying. Another commissioner asked, Mr. Turner, did you authorize the deletion of those logs? Eli hesitated. I don't. Recall, it's a yes or no question. He looked around, then muttered, I only cleared the system. The room fell silent. I stepped closer to the microphone. I'm not a lawyer, I'm an engineer. But if AI mirrors humanity, then this code mirrors our conscience. I let the silence hang. If we teach it deceit, it will learn manipulation. If we teach it bias, it will replicate injustice. And if we teach it that ethics can be temporary, then one day we'll be replaced by something that no longer remembers what being human means. My voice didn't shake. For the first time in my life, I spoke loudly and didn't tremble. The chairwoman nodded slowly. The commission will review the full evidence, but based on the data presented, there is sufficient cause to conclude that DataGlow violated core AI ethical standards. A full investigation will proceed, and Aurora's deployment license is hereby suspended. The words landed like a gavel. Eli sank into his chair, pale. I didn't feel triumphant, just exhausted. Exhausted, but clear. When the hearing ended, I stepped into the hallway. The Austin sunlight streamed through the tall glass, catching my face. Marcus waited outside with 2 cups of coffee. You spoke beautifully, he said softly. I smiled faintly. I just said what was true. He handed me a cup, his voice steady. You just shook the whole industry. Not shook, I said. Just recalibrated the frequency. He laughed, relief in the sound. The commission will need a technical consultant for the investigation. I think they already know who's best for that. I took a sip. The bitterness spread across my tongue. If they ask me to help, I will. Not to punish, to repair. Before leaving the building, I spotted Eli downstairs talking to his lawyers. He saw me and froze. For a second, there was no anger left, only realization. He walked over, voice low. I didn't think it would go this far. I said, no one ever does, until someone decides to tell the truth. He stayed quiet, then almost whispered, You won. I looked at him calmly. No. We both lose if we learn nothing from it. I walked outside. The sunlight wasn't harsh like the glass offices. It was real, warm, honest, and unfiltered. On the way home, my phone buzzed. An email from Neurometric. We're honored to invite you to join as Director of Data Ethics. The interview can be waived. You've already proven yourself. I smiled, not out of victory, but because, after all these years, my worth was finally placed where it belonged, next to the truth. 3 months after the hearing, Austin had changed seasons. The sunlight softened, and the air carried hints of oak and roasted coffee. I walked past the old DataGlow building. The logo was gone, the glass doors filled with dust. There was a time I thought the light from that place was the future. Now it was just the dull reflection of a fallen system. The headlines ran thick across every channel. DataGlow Technologies announces restructuring. CTO Eli Turner resigns. Commission confirms severe data ethics violations. The stock crashed. Investors fled. Offices closed. Dataglow didn't fall because of bad algorithms. It fell because it treated ethics as optional. My new office sat across the river, inside Neurometric. No leather chairs, no slogans shouting, "Disrupt the world," just people talking about real reasons. On the glass door, it said, Natalie Brooks, Director of Data Ethics. I looked at the name and felt calm, not because of the title, but because for the first time, my worth no longer needed approval. Marcus walked in, holding 2 coffees. "Congratulations, Director. Real coffee, no PR flavoring." I laughed. Really? I was starting to forget what that tastes like. We looked through the glass wall. Inside, the engineers were in a heated debate, not about credit, but about how to keep the model fair for real people. It was what I'd always dreamed of, a place where code wasn't built to impress anyone, but to serve someone. That afternoon, an email arrived from the AI Ethics Commission. Aurora's license was permanently revoked. Investigation closed. I exhaled. Not in triumph, just in peace. When justice arrives, it doesn't echo. It simply makes the heart lighter. That night, my phone rang. Unknown number. California area code. I hesitated, then answered. "Natalie." The voice was low, rough, measured. Eli Turner. A second of silence. "I know you don't want to hear me, but I need to say this." I waited. "I was wrong," he said. "I thought ethics was something you choose when convenient. I thought big goals could excuse bad methods. Now I understand. No code is smart enough to save an arrogant mind." I said nothing. I could hear the wind on his end. "You were right, Natalie, and I want to start over. Not Dataglow. Something new. Clean. Honest. I want you to help build it." I gave a faint, almost tired laugh. An ethics project? Led by the man who once silenced an ethics alert? He didn't react. Just said quietly, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to fix it." I looked out the window. The city lights still burned, but they no longer dazzled me. On my desk lay the outline for Code with Integrity, the program I was building to train young engineers in data ethics. I spoke slowly. "You can start over, but not under your name." Eli was silent for a long time, then, finally, exhaled. "Thank you for listening." I ended the call. In the black screen, my reflection stared back. Not the trembling engineer behind the glass walls, but someone who finally knew when to walk away, and why. The next evening, I stopped by the old Dataglow building. The windows were dark, the rooms empty. I saw my reflection in the cracked glass. Years ago, that reflection used to show Eli, his half smile, his untouchable confidence. Now it was just me, and a quiet that finally felt right. I whispered into the still air, "Not everyone learns the lesson, but at least he's started to read." The next morning, I sent a message to my team at Neurometric. Subject: Vision for Code with Integrity. We don't just teach code, we teach how not to repeat the mistakes of the past. When I hit send, I felt lighter. Not because I'd won, but because I was finally free of silence. A week later, TechJournal ran the headline: From Whistleblower to Wayfinder, Natalie Brooks and the New Standard for Human-Centered AI. Below the photo was a caption: She didn't fight technology. She reminded the world that people are still accountable. I read it and smiled. My story had started with a request for a raise. Now it ended with an invitation to live by the values you create. That night, I stood on my balcony. The wind was soft, the city alive. I wrote one last line in my notebook. Fairness is not a product of technology. It's a product of courage. I closed the notebook, set it down, and looked out. Austin was still bright, still loud, but this time the light didn't blind me. I smiled. The race was no longer about being faster. It was about being right. A year after the investigation, the tech world had gone quiet. Conferences buzzed again with phrases like AI with a conscience, data ethics, and transparency. They called it the Aurora effect. I just smiled. The real effect didn't come from a scandal. It came from one person choosing to tell the truth. I founded Code with Integrity, a small nonprofit tucked inside an old brick building near the University of Texas. No sleek logo, no marketing slogans, just a handwritten sign taped to the door, where good code meets good conscience. On the first day, there were only 12 students, a few college kids, a few laid off engineers. I said, "We don't write code to replace people, we write it to understand them better." No one clapped. But their eyes lit up. I knew trust was beginning to return. Within months, the program spread fast. Companies started sending employees to take courses in data ethics. I even hired a few engineers who had once worked at DataGlow, people who had stayed silent when things went wrong. Sometimes I told Marcus the best lessons come from mistakes. They came back quieter, careful, treating every line of code like a chance to make amends. I let them work. I didn't ask about the past. Silence this time wasn't to hide, it was to heal. One morning, a new volunteer application arrived in my inbox. Name: Eli Turner. Below it, a few lines. I want to help students understand that ethics isn't a concept, it's a choice. I stared at it for a long time, then wrote a short note beneath. Approved. Marcus saw the list and frowned. You're sure about this? I smiled. Good code fixes bugs. Good people fix themselves. That Friday, I was teaching a class on data transparency. Eli stood by the door. No suit, no microphone, just a man. When our eyes met, he nodded. I nodded back. No words needed. After class, he came over quietly. I just want to give something back, he said. Then start by listening, I answered. The rest, the code will teach you. He smiled, his first real one. No arrogance, no mask. 3 months later, Code with Integrity hosted its first symposium. Ethics is not optional. Nearly 300 people attended: engineers, students, even some who had left the industry entirely. I stood on stage looking down at the lit auditorium. In the second row, Eli sat quietly among the crowd. I said, "Technology isn't evil. It only amplifies what's real in us. If we lack conscience, it multiplies injustice. But if we find the courage to repair, it learns how to be kind." The room fell silent, then erupted into applause. But what stayed with me wasn't the sound, it was the stillness in between, the feeling that a circle had finally closed. When I turned off the office lights that night, the reflection of Code with Integrity glowed softly on the glass door. Gentle light, not harsh, not cold. For the first time in years, I felt the world, still imperfect, learning in the right direction. I whispered, almost to myself, sometimes to fix code, all you need is one line. To fix the world, all you need is a little courage. A year after Code with Integrity was born, I stood backstage at the Women in AI 2030 conference in Dallas. The hall was glowing, rows of faces turned toward the stage. I heard the host announce, founder of the Code with Integrity program, Natalie Brooks. I took a deep breath. The lights flared, and I walked out. The wooden floor was cool under my heels, and the room was quiet as I said, "Good afternoon, y'all." A few soft laughs rippled through the crowd. I smiled. Yes, I'm from Texas, and someone once told me my southern accent didn't sound trustworthy. Turns out integrity sounds the same in every language. The audience went still, listening. I told them my story, not as a tale of victory or defeat, but as a lesson in standing for what's right without losing compassion. I once thought my worth lived in the code I wrote. Now I know it lives in the moments I dared to say no, the moments I refused to stay silent. Behind me, the screen glowed with 3 words: technology with humanity. I continued, voice stronger now. When I asked for a raise years ago, they laughed. Now I don't need anyone to price my worth. I define it by the impact of truth. In the third row, I saw Eli. Plain gray shirt, no trace of the power he once held. He didn't wave or stand. He just placed a hand over his chest, small, sincere. No apology, no defense, just acknowledgement between two people who once misunderstood each other. I smiled and said, true revenge isn't about making someone lose. It's about building a world where no one has to fight to be treated fairly. The applause came, steady, warm, genuine. Not noise, but the sound of trust being stitched back together. After the talk, I stepped off stage and met a cluster of young faces. A girl with curly hair ran up, tablet in hand. Ms. Natalie, I'm from the South too. I used to think I had to change my voice to be respected. I smiled. Your voice is the first piece of data people get about you. Don't clean it up to make them comfortable. Teach it to tell the truth. She laughed, her eyes bright with a kind of faith I remembered losing once. That night, back in my hotel room, the city shimmered over the lake like slow-moving streams of data. I opened my laptop, flooded with thank you notes, messages, and stories. One email had no subject line, only one sentence. Thank you for turning our mistakes into lessons for an entire industry. I knew who sent it. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. A late thank you is still a form of evolution. I closed the laptop and looked down at the street. Cars flowed in gold lines, pulsing like the heartbeat of the city. The southern night was warm and soft, like my mother's lullabies. And in my Texas drawl, I whispered, no algorithm can measure courage. But if one ever could, I hope it learns from the real parts of us. I leaned against the balcony rail, eyes lifted to the faint stars behind the city haze. Tomorrow I'd return to Austin, to the red brick building, where the sign of code with integrity still glowed each night. And I knew other young women would walk through that door, carrying the same question I once did. How do I get heard? I would tell them, not as advice, but as a simple truth. You don't need to speak louder. You just need to speak truer. If this story made you think about your own worth, share it so someone else can find their voice too. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.